Never in the history of the world have the merchants of obscenity had available to them the modern facilities for disseminating this filth. The onslaught of the communist masters of deceit.
Pinko, Commie, Slutz. Pinko, Commie, Slutz. Pinko, Commie, Slutz. Pinko, Commie, Slutz.
Hello.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, man. Waiting on Steve here.
Yeah.
But you know what? Good thing we waited a day. Otherwise, we would have missed this great J.K. Rowling content.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Why does she? Why? It's like she's giving you absolutely no fucking choice. But us, I think Steve's here.
Hello.
Hi,
Hello.
Steve. I was just bringing up J.K. Rowling shit on Twitter.
Yeah.
Which, for no graciously justifiable reason should this woman be saying these things, really. It's just...
the protests in Minneapolis were actually led... the violence was instigated by goblin interlopers.
There were definitely some goblin outside agitators.
Goblins
at the very
with
least.
3 parentheses around them, if that wasn't clear.
And if anybody doesn't know what we're talking about, J.K. Rowling has taken an infamously turf turn late in life, and it's just today she tweeted. She had a qualm with a headline that said something about the post-COVID world for people who menstruate. And she was like, oh, gee, golly gosh, we used to have a word for them, huh? What was it, one bomb?
Yeah,
And,
okay. This is also one instance where people who menstruate is not some sort of virtue signal post-gender use of the term. It's literally for people who menstruate.
It's because the thing is talking about menstruation.
Yeah, if you are a assigned female at birth woman who, in fact, went through menopause, this wouldn't affect you. So it's not about, they're not just inserting the phrase in for woman. They're just literally, it's about menstruation.
Yeah. And, you know what, guys? Hey, welcome to Pinko Commie, Slutz.
Oh, yeah. We're talking about menstruation and
We're
turfs.
talking about menstruation and turfs. Yeah, I think what bothers me the most, what bothers me the most is why would someone with so much power who wrote a children's series about, fucking truth and justice and not being a Nazi, essentially, why would you continue to pick on it? Like, it doesn't matter what you think about the framework. This group is marginalized to this degree. And
but England's fucking weird.
They are very weird about it. I will admit that. The secondary thing, the less troubling aspect of it for me is that she and people like her make it so it's impossible to have any hairy discussions around this framework right now, because it's like you don't want to be wrapped up in this turf nonsense,
Isn't she suing someone right now or
something? And
I don't fucking know.
It's like you don't want to get wrapped up in this turf nonsense, but hold on. I want to be careful about what I'm saying here. So my feeling about how misogyny exists is that it can happen anytime, anywhere. Even it can be applied to a shitty fucking person. And it doesn't I don't know. We should be wary of pretending like things aren't misogynistic just because it's being applied to someone who's arguably objectively odious and terrible or whatever. So like there's an element of how she wants to talk about womanhood and essentializing it where like there's one small bit of it that I can get because she's a woman of a certain age, and how her narrative about feminism is like trying to carve out space to talk about the experience of being a woman and blah, blah, blah. And that's the aspect she feels infringed upon, right? Now, what's annoying is that we can't ever point out an instance where these kind of things intersect because there are these stark fucking shitheads, the TERFs, who insist on a conversation that's supposed to be about humanizing. They insist on dehumanizing the conversation. And it's you know, I don't know, because the menstruation thing, it hit funny because I definitely had a annoying conversation where someone told me to not talk about menstruation in a women's group because it was exclusionary. And I did get kind of annoyed about that, but so what? Like in the grand scheme. And I guess is what you know what I mean? And like, what I'm saying is like a trans person who's trying to advocate for their fucking very existence. It's still possible for them to be clumsy about it sometimes. And doesn't give you a right to fucking jump to an oppositional side or fucking be cruel to people. Especially when, you have the hearts of a generation of certain kinds of people, and it sucks, like, just on that level.
It is very much as stealing valor.
She is.
Like, no, I mean, the whole conversation is a co-opting of oppression.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And people want to fit it into like a hierarchical structure that's very tidy. And it's a fucking reality of it is that we are grasping at straws trying to understand these things that we are all experiencing collectively.
Yeah.
It's not neat.
Yeah, no, and I remember there was a point in time where I hated the idea, the concept that there is such a thing as the quote-unquote oppression Olympics. But that is, to a certain extent, how a lot of liberals view the framework, that there are these completely separate, atomized, competing self-interests that don't have any sort of common cause. Just through accident of history, we happen to oppress all of these collective groups in a myriad of completely disconnected ways. And it's our job to prioritize the solutions to each, because if they don't have a collective cause, they don't have a collective solution. And that implies that there's actually competition for the solution amongst them, which, reflects capitalist liberal assumptions about a marketplace.
And scarcity.
Yeah. It's an artificial scarcity of politics.
I also think liberals have a tendency, like, to childishly, I care about the person who's being picked on. And you know what? Therefore, in a very flattened out way, the person who's being picked on is automatically valued more. Right? Like, that's how I show that I care about equality.
Yeah.
But if you're sloppily applying that metric, you lose the thread of what is even important. And that's what contributes to, like, we just need more women of color dictators or something. Like, it's the essentializing. It all comes back to that.
Yeah, to be the first person to get shot by a rubber bullet on Black Lives Matter way. Which I think might be a segue, and I have a feeling Steve might want to take the lead on this one.
Yeah, Steve, where were you just at?
I was, I just marched for the fourth time this week. Fourth march. I have this weird dystopian fantasy where I'm imagining the coming world of just 24/7, like Truman Show level of marches going around by boroughs, where packs of people take shifts in different neighborhoods to showcase the protest, and that is then allowed on certain hours or on certain streets. But it for the last 10 days, it's felt like that.
That is so weird how you're taking place in a revolution and you're kind of interpreting it through a lens of a work schedule.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how that works.
Yeah.
No, we marched today. Ariel and I marched today we marched from Barclays Center to Crown Heights. But before that, we went to Williamsburg. And I really want to talk about the difference between the two, because I was in McCarran Park for a silent vigil.
Okay, before you do, I just want to say I'm on a channel that basically someone just posts the police scanner from the day, and I guess it was probably yesterday that I read that McCarran Park got cleared out by the cops.
I know that they had another protest yesterday, but I'm not aware of that.
Because, it does just sound like the liberal Polish Catholics from Greenpoint who are like doing their Polish Catholic liberal protests of silent vigils, more silent vigils, and a lot more silent vigils.
And it definitely felt religious.
But on at least one occasion, I will just say in their defense, I did read on the scanner that the police decided to forcibly clear the park out. So good for them.
My favorite irony from that was a woman holding up the sign, "White silence is violence," and the entire place being silent.
That is so fucking Surge. Standing up for racial justice. It's like just the whitest anti-racist group that ever existed. It's called Surge, and that is something they would do.
Instead of the broad brush, we need to look at which white women have the strongest basis to see that an agenda that serves racial justice, gender justice, etc., can serve them too.
Yeah, it was. It made me angry more than any. I recognized that it was supposed to be moments of reflection on our whiteness and the problems that we brought upon the world through.
But does
sin.
Performing it, this is what I don't understand. What is the purpose? Even down to, I'm seeing a lot of my well-intentioned, I guess, friends saying, hey, white people, I donated to these places today. What did you do? Kind of thing, which I get that they think it's, we're all going to get in on this and show how we can be so supportive and allies and blah, blah, blah. But it does just show that you hadn't done any of these things before.
Yeah.
You had not engaged in a meaningful conversation about anti-racism. And frankly, in a very petty way, I'm like, boo-hoo, someone called you a race traitor?
Hey, white people, when I was checking out of the supermarket today, it asked me if I would like to donate $1 to children who are hungry. And I said, yes.
Well, okay, so there was this silent vigil, and both looked at each other and was like, this is the stupidest fucking thing.
Papists.
Yeah, I don't even know who organized it, but it was just pointless.
As with most things, I blame the Polish.
But then we went to Barclays Center, and that was the most fun protest that I've ever been to. I sent videos to the chat, but it was...
Yeah, it was lit.
It was lit. There was
super fun.
There was some dance parties that broke out. There was a drum line. It was very much more organized than previously. Jamani Williams was there, and he's really trying to take hold of this as a political rallying cry to become mayor someday in the near distant future.
Yeah, this is Bill de Blasio 3 years before his campaign. Yeah, he's going to be awesome during the campaign, but you're just going to know you're going to hate the motherfucker.
Yeah. Jumaane Williams was there. They had all of the black women come up to the front for the kneeling.
Wait, did they just get to kneel in front, or did everyone get to bend the knee to the black women?
No, everyone bent the knee, but
Did Jumaane Williams declare a revolutionary government that we would declare loyalty to, and that those in the NYPD who still take orders from the commissioners are traitors to New York? That would have been the move.
I think that was his gist, but otherwise it was more like grandstanding than anything. And, you know, I have problems with Jumaane Williams' politics.
Yeah, no, I met the dude once. I got that crowd.
But yeah, no, there was some guy who had a wonderful boombox that was playing D-Max, NWA. You know, no Rage Against the Machine, but I was really hoping for it. Me, white person. But it was fun. It was lighthearted. And then we got to Brooklyn Avenue and we converged with a prior protest, meaning that there was like over 1,000 people because we were like 500 to 700.
Yeah.
And there was like 300 to 500 more people at a different protest that was earlier, and they converged with us. And then there was like indecision and infighting amongst the ranks as to whether or not they should stay out after 11 because the commissioner was on the phone with them telling them to disperse by 11 or else everyone would be arrested. And there was a sort of like a indecision as to whether or not the group should keep going or like go home. And that's when I was like, this does not seem like a good idea to stick around here. But that brings me to like my earlier experiences this week. The most exciting and scary one was Sunday night. Sunday night, Elle and I went over the Manhattan Bridge. We went to Barclays Center and marched over the Manhattan Bridge. It was beautiful. Everybody was kind of like excited. It was like one of the first night after the cop car burned. And then we marched in to Manhattan and we got to the post office at Church Ave and Canal Street. And there was a bunch of people with their hands up doing the don't shoot. And we get up to them and I was like, something's off about this. Then there was like a sea, like a waterfall of faces just charging at us. And the cops had charged at the group. The group was like very dangerously running at our face. The two of us like just started running down Church Avenue. There was shots fired. It sounded like pellet guns. It was terrifying. More terrifying that we were going to get trampled.
Maybe you can confirm this, but at the time you shared Ted Lieu, the state senator's
Yeah.
So that was that event.
That was that event. Yeah, we were right in the, like, you can see where we were running towards. We weren't in the camera, obviously. We were just coming up on that group when they started charging at us.
Yeah.
And we didn't know what happened. We just saw this sea of faces and we just hightailed it. I mean, it was one of the scariest fucking moments of our lives. Like, just, you know, batons charging at us in riot gear.
The one thing the feed on the scanner is really putting forth is it's just every night there's a protest on every goddamn block.
Yep.
Like, you get a thing in 49th and 8th, then the next one is Prospect Park, then Washington Square, then Williamsburg Bridge, I heard, got shut down earlier today. Yeah, no, just like every fucking spot in the city, there's a goddamn protest. I say as I named Midtown, Lower Manhattan, and Brooklyn, and nowhere else.
This is the most widespread kind of protest that we've certainly ever experienced in our lifetimes, at the very least. So, yeah, it's fucking everywhere. It's every goddamn block.
Yeah. I mean, shit, my dad was even talking about today, like, oh man, it's so weird how it's in every country too. And I'm just sitting there as the smarmy Marxist going, learn internationalism. But
I will say I was, I feel like I don't want to jinx it, but I did see, I'm from Maryland, and there were places in Maryland where there were multiple Black Lives Matter protests that, wow, well, what do you know? Who would have thought this classically, basic, bare bones, white suburban kind of racist place is having multiple protests. And it's interesting because a lot of these protests, especially in smaller towns, are being organized by high school students.
Yeah, no, I mean, in smaller towns, that is who organizes shit.
It's fucking kind of cool. I just, I'm old enough to have been trained not to get excited about any possibility.
If you're in, I've grown up in white suburbs, and if you're in white suburbs, the people who organize things are the 3 high school students who in my time listened to Rage, or aging hippie parents. And that's all the fucking organization that occurs in a lot of those towns, because who the fuck else is there?
So, getting back to my experience, I just want to say Manhattan was one of the scariest places I've ever been.
Yeah, man.
It was Mad Max universe. The only cars on the streets were just caravans of cops roving. We walked up from Canal Street, after they dispersed the crowd. We walked up to Union Square, nobody in Union Square. We found city bikes and started riding down Broadway. And this is where it was interesting, was we did see looting. There were packs of people. I saw people with giant mallets or hammers breaking into matcha tea stores.
Awesome, dude.
It was awesome. And I was riding through the city bikes. They were trying to get into Dwayne Reed too, but the matcha tea store was the best. It was like a chocolate place that sold matcha tea, and just, people were coming out with boxes of really bougie tea and chocolate.
Well, yeah, no, this is how hip-hop started after the New York blackouts allowed a bunch of people to just raid audio stores and get some nice mixers and shit and invent hip-hop. There's going to be a whole new urban matcha tea culture phenomenon that will develop over the next 30 years out of this. It's going to be fucking great, man.
Yeah, but every window that wasn't boarded up was broken.
Honestly,
to
not touch the boarded up ones, because boards are not that strong.
I'm sure there were some that had been broken in and boards were covering it then and then. But yeah, Soho is just smashed, and it's awesome because Soho is useless. Soho's
best years were when it was all smashed up and the buildings were abandoned.
And from whence it came, really.
Yeah, goddamn right. Bring back that fucking Led Zeppelin cover, baby.
I've heard from other people in Manhattan that every single building in Union Square has been boarded up, and pretty much most of the East Village also boarded up.
You gotta figure the main hub of subway stops is probably a hub of protest. It's easy to fucking get to.
Yeah.
And so that was Sunday night. We took city bikes. That was terrifying. Mad Max universe.
Technically looted city bikes.
No. I paid for them.
Oh shit! You paid for fucking city bikes during the revolution? You fucking cop.
Is he going to steal one of them mallets and break
Yeah,
it?
or ask someone else to do it. I'm sure they would.
And then going over the Manhattan Bridge again was pretty exhilarating on the bikes.
Yeah, cool.
And making it all the way back to my car parked at Barclays Center. And coming back was Starship Troopers universe. Like there were toy soldiers. There must have been 2,000 cops.
Oh yeah, okay.
Just gathered in the Barclays Center area, and they were in lines marching toy soldiers.
Yeah,
riot gear.
Yeah, that'd just be RoboCop universe if we're
RoboCop universe, Starship Trooper universe.
Yeah, some Vera then.
Near future of utopia, dystopia that's come alive. And then went out Tuesday, went out Wednesday. One of the nights we got, I witnessed some cops beatings at Cadman Plaza. Just unprovoked brutality. It was, pretty awesome by the cops. Gotta give it to them. They just love the shit out of black people.
Now they're diversifying just the glee they're taking and beating the shit out of almost anybody.
They were beating up white people too. I saw 2 black people be arrested who weren't even part of the protest.
Mm-hmm. Oh, but did you see that the NYPD tweeted all the things that got thrown at them?
Yeah, I did see that. Yeah.
Someone threw an apple they had taken a bite out of.
Cool, dude.
And they were like, look at this projectile hurled at one of our dear officers.
I think the only thing that I saw getting thrown at was just empty water bottles. Majority of the things being thrown.
Yeah, I mean, what you should not do as what could be called an art project and therefore, protected by the First Amendment, I say, as a lawyer, would be to take an empty Pepsi can, and what you shouldn't do is fill it with concrete and then throw that at
somebody named Mike Tracy.
Oh, gosh. Don't remind me of my missed opportunity.
All right, Bunny, you please tell us about it.
Yes, Mike Tracy was out and about over this way in Jersey City, and I saw some people were gathering, and then I saw that he was out here on his Twitter. Complete diagonal opposite of where everyone was crowding or whatever. So then I went out there not appropriately dressed whatsoever. I was wearing slip-on shoes and whatever, and because there was a lot of police, a lot. It was just an absurd amount of police. But I mean, it was a tepid, lukewarm kind of one of these in the grand scheme, in terms of what the vibe was. But I had eyes on him. But then people were kind of moving, and I went to change my shoes. And when I went back out, I couldn't get close enough to him. I don't know either what I was going to do. If the protests are the place for me to get my rocks off on fucking dunking on Mike Tracy and being like, Pinko, Commie, Slutz.
Get off my head, Tom.
I know. I was just, hoping I was going to have
line.
a more convenient opportunity. But he was out here doing his new fucking spiel, which is these poor people of color cops, and trying to create whatever, just
class solidarity with the cops.
Yeah.
Guys. But yeah, he's out here being a dipshit. But yeah, that's a narrative that has sprung up for sure. People will use anything to try to, the same way the outside agitator is a well-worn narrative to try to delegitimize these kind of protests.
Okay, so first of all, you have this sort of black pill defeatism that essentially leads to this conclusion of, well, isn't it convenient? I'm absolved of responsibility from doing anything because this will fail. And then I think on the more insidious side is this idea that this is not based on class, but on racial justice, which can be co-opted by bourgeois corporate interests, which again leads to this conclusion of, therefore, I'm absolved of responsibility for participating. But more so, it's this almost Gen X-y, lazy idea that if something can be co-opted, it must be bad. Any working class movement will be fought against in two different ways. The first way will be through brutal violence, which we are seeing. The second way will be the liberal class attempting to co-opt it. It doesn't matter what you're doing, what your quote-unquote message is. It will certainly be attempted to be redirected in a seemingly friendly way towards non-productive ends that will end in useless reforms. Moreover, as socialists, we need to understand that this is in part a study of the phenomenon of revolution, not a study of how to do a revolution. Revolutions occur from the internal contradictions of capital. Those contradictions boil over and you get revolutions. As a socialist, you can understand why that happens and how that happens related to capital. But it's not a license to say, like, oh, this revolution isn't messaging correctly. This revolution isn't saying the magic words of this is about class and therefore I can participate in it. The revolution comes. Your job is to participate and understand that and hopefully try and build upon that, being led by those who are rising up. And there's this strain that's basically saying this is race-based, not class-based. That is complete horseshit. This is occurring as a result of racism, which is a superstructure of the class system. And it's our job to follow the people who are organically rising up from those contradictions.
But I think that can bring us tidily around to this 8 can't wait liberal
right. On the
agenda.
flip side, it is the job of the socialists to call out bullshit like this. DeRay is not the organically uprising working class. DeRay is some guy.
Yeah. I mean, it's there's a way that even those, you have to be wary of essentializing even the working class, because even those who you could argue come from the working class, so therefore they speak for it. It's not that hard to get caught up in liberalism. It's the way out offered to you in a lot of places.
No individual speaks for the working class. The fact that there are protests in all 50 states, in every major city in the United States, is the voice of the working class. No human being will speak words for the working class.
And we should always be suspicious of taking our cues too much from any individual, especially I think even DeRay's rise is a little bit of an example of this kind of co-opting energy. I'm not trying to say that I believe DeRay to be ill-intentioned. I think it's perfectly understandable how someone could think, yeah, I'm going to use things that liberalism is telling me are the ways out of struggling. I'm going to use these things or this knowledge I have of it to offer solutions, right? Because that is the narrative the liberals are comfortable with. Oh, it's just one. Actually, all you need to know is one clever trick, and you've solved racism. You just got to be willing to do it. Like, there's people want that to be the answer. They want it to be something academic, data-driven. They want it to be data-driven, and I want to just say, always be suspicious of data-driven solutions as they are applied to matters of life and death.
Technocratic.
Yeah. I mean, and just, you think about DeRay, if you're familiar with him, you know him because he always wears the same blue vest. Like, he branded himself in this very overt way during Ferguson and Freddie Gray. This initiative, I guess, he's put out is done in coordination with the Project Zero, that they're saying they have these nifty data-driven solutions that you don't even need to do major legislation about that will reduce violence by 72%.
And I just want to put a note here. I have an aside about this, but go on.
So just flatly, without further contextualizing this, saying that relies on the data that they've pulled that every one of these measures would tightly reduce violence by 15%. And if you add them all together, But the problem is most of these initiatives are already in place in some form or another. They're unenforceable. They require police to self-report, which is
let me
a
read out
disaster.
the 8. Ban chokeholds and strangleholds.
Yeah.
Require de-escalation. Require warning before shooting. Require exhaust all alternatives before shooting. Duty to intervene. Ban shooting at moving vehicles. Okay. Require use of force continuum, which require comprehensive reporting.
Like, how do you measurably do any of those things?
It is really atomizing violence and making it a very tight package. Like, violence is something that can be contained or it can be intellectualized, just like the looting can be intellectualized or, intellectualized and dismissed as, morally bad, morally good. And these all seem to treat that same continuum of morality around violence.
And also, how is this our demand rather than... We can talk about abolishing the police. We can have that discussion, but what about disarming the police? How is that not a mainstream, progressive, not leftist, not socialist, progressive liberal, whatever the fuck that word means? How is that not to raise number one demand?
I'm going to shoot him in the leg instead of in the heart.
Number one, 100%, beat cops do not have a gun on their waist. There is a gun, it's locked in your fucking trunk, deal with it. That's our initial demand. Negotiate down from there. What the fuck is this? Like, even as a basic liberal reformist idea, they don't carry guns anymore. That should be the moderate position.
And also, I'd argue a data-driven one.
Extremely data-driven.
It's fucking, I just hate the application of smart-sounding framing to shit that fucking common sense you can get to more
This is
sound
basically what
solutions.
if the police was more like Office Space as a solution to 200 years of race, or from 1619, whatever the fuck that year amount is of racism.
Well, yeah, I mean, it kind of just takes, like, corporate political correctness and apply it to policing.
Yeah.
Like, you can't...
Go out a fucking TPS
Well, and that's
report.
That's what the Mike Tracy narrative is about, by focusing on police of color and, being like, oh no, in our rush to get justice with the police, we might hurt a black cop's feelings.
Maybe Mike Tracy just got made to look like a little girl by Ann Coulter, and his entire fucking career since then has just been compensating for that. He was more interesting when he at least looked like Mario from Super Mario Brothers, in college.
I remember making fun of him with his girlfriend about that. With you, actually, the three of us.
He totally looked like Mario from Super Mario Brothers, and if he was less of a coward, he would have just done the mustache. But he was too much of a fucking coward for that. So, you know what? Fuck him.
But yeah, I mean, I always think a helpful way to think about these things are to, the police as a fucking ghost entity wants to stay in existence. And it will insipidly create these weird arguments to try to sustain itself. That is the nature of something like a power structure like the fucking police. Like, the half of the reason that people
8 Can't Wait is 1992 Bill Clinton. It's useless. It's worse than useless. It is complete fucking horseshit. It's 1988 George Bush Sr. It has no fucking value. Just say the cops should not have guns, and let the left say the cops should not be.
Okay, the left seemed to be split on the two demands of abolish the police and defund the police.
Whatever. Well, I do have thoughts on that, but
I see that more than anything, at least in the posters that I read. I was pleasantly surprised to hear abolish the police chant tonight, which, brought a swell to my heart for someone who is still waiting to hand a Molotov cocktail to a black woman to burn down a police car in the name of identity politics.
Yeah, okay. So to fund the police to zero, so then there's no police. So whatever, I agree with defund the police.
No, but the idea that $6 billion could be cut to $3 billion and you'd have half the problems.
Sure.
Yeah. It's another version of, don't we all feel good about solutions that involve numbers?
That should be, that should be the also progressive left position, in addition to, that comes with disarming the police, is if you're not worried about them getting into gunfights all the time, they don't need the budget they need. So as far as I'm concerned, that's also just generally a progressive liberal solution that should be... As
opposed to what's going on in Minneapolis, which is almost entirely abolishing the police force.
Yeah.
So look at that, so quick.
They did it. They did it.
It can be just like that, everyone. I think that is another upside to this whole time right now, is that people are collectively waking up to the possibility that things can change actually very quickly if,
material interest.
Sorry to make it. Yeah, but for lack of a better way, for a way to communicate this for the less into it, the vibe has to change.
I do want to just say that, I recently reread an essay by Fisher that kind of, I think, introduces an interesting concept to all.
Which one?
The October 79 essay is the realism is the enemy of the real. Basically, what he was saying in that is being realistic, the way liberals and conservatives define being realistic, is not realistic. The idea of saying, and he uses the environment for this, and I'll use it as a similar jumping off point and make my point about this conversation from that, is I'm struck by the primary. Beto O'Rourke said the following statement: if we do nothing about global warming in the next 10 years, there won't be a civilization left. That would be the real. That is true. There is reason to think that this is an existential threat to society. But at the same time, the solutions he gave were politically realistic. They were things that could get passed if the Democrats beat every poll by points. They were things that could maybe happen in the minds of the long, but they wouldn't actually affect the existential threat he talked about. And he has the ability to hold both those thoughts in his head at the same time. And many people on the left discuss, we shouldn't say abolish the police because that's alienating. Well, here's the problem. Abolishing the police is the real. It is the rational solution to police violence, because police violence isn't about bad cops. It's not about bad training. It's not about body cams, because we've tried all of this shit and it doesn't fucking matter. It's about the police. It's about the institution and the way that it interacts in the social structure it was created, and it does what it's designed to do, which is to be brutal. And so it's not a matter of what is politically realistic. That's what they talk about. That's what 8 Can't Wait talks about. Is what is, we can do this. these are things we can do,
Well,
but it doesn't fucking solve the problem. And the problem is an existential threat to our society.
Yeah, that where there is a confusion of the ability to deduce what is realistic to get done politically with doing that quote unquote work in their heads. They feel it's equivalent to have solved the problem. It's the way it is treated is as if we have gotten solutions that way, and plainly we have not. It's just not looking at the.
I think the other Fisherian aspect of that is that it's a marketing exercise.
Yeah.
That all that is real collapses into PR. That, you can have existential threats. They had existential threats about the environment in the 90s. They also had existential threats about the police in the 90s. And the response, the neoliberal reforms that were put in place, were to atomize it and to turn it into a marketable thing so that you had, corporate greenification and you had increased policing of policing.
No, well, you also had the acquiescing to the narrative that the conservatives established, which is criminals are running rampant and doing all this shit, and we need protection and safety. Like, half of the things people used to praise Bill Clinton about are him fucking sucking their dick about
If I can just
interject
a little more thoughts on this, though, is it's not even an issue so much of PR as it is a complete unawareness that there is a difference. The justification for it can't wait is in itself that it can be passed. And also, any objective assessment would say that that's probably not true on any sort of grand scale. Most of even these very moderate demands will never get fucking implemented for 51% plus of the urban population of the United States. But that's neither here nor there.
Well, and every single one of them has a caveat for using excessive force. If that's left up to the
the whole
judgment
statistical analysis of this will reduce by 71% is bullshit, and they know it's bullshit. We know they know it's bullshit. Everyone knows that's bullshit. They're not putting it forward because it will reduce, police-related shootings or whatever the fuck they call it by 71%. They're putting it forward because it can be passed, and its ability to be passed is the victory. They don't even envision a different victory than that. They can't.
Well, it kind of gets back to what we were talking about. The symbolic is more important than the
signifier versus signified. Yeah.
The sign of getting it passed means that they're more likely to get reelected, which kick down real change and point to the previous change as reason to elect them again.
Yeah, this is now a Derrida podcast, so I hope you guys are fucking on board for that, bitches.
I mean, I can talk about Derridian idea of responsibility in this context, because the responsibility of society versus responsibility of the individual.
Oh yeah, he did have that shit.
And it was all related to apartheid.
Yeah.
And
God, the 80s were awesome.
Well, it was like literally 1990, and he went on a tour of South Africa and had this whole thing of like societal responsibility versus societal forgiveness, which interesting, but also unrelated. But yeah, sign, signifier, we pass neoliberal reforms not because they actually solve the issues of society, but because it allows the people that push the reforms to continue their tenure in office. And that's how you get neoliberal Democrats in office,
But I think the thing that Fisher takes to the next level with the concept of capitalist realism is that power structure then becomes an epistemological structure, and it simply is the fact that those reforms are the victory, and the victory is those reforms, and what the fuck is the alternative to those reforms and the victory?
Right, there's no future.
Yeah.
There's no future with
It's
those.
just all there. We're going to get another fucking police brutality protest. We're going to pass reform. I mean, at this point, 1968 was the point where, like, MLK died and we passed, like, various federal level, like, Fair Housing Act, etc. We're even past that point. We're at the point where we have nationwide protests, what you can call riots, and we talk about how we ought to do something, and then we just don't, and it's fine.
Well, it was the same way with the COVID. Like, we talked about how we ought to do something, and then we just didn't.
Yeah.
This, by the way, is a precursor. Marlo and I are going to start our own solo Patreon of just taking a Mark Fisher article and then doing one of these things for one article.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
We're going to get into accelerationism.
Yeah, no, you should get...
Oh, shit. You should, like, no girls allowed, and then you should let me do another bonus episode where I'm like,
This is Pinko
what's that?
Commie male
And
escorts.
then our listeners who are not familiar can feel like they are experiencing it through me.
Yeah, no, okay, so, yeah, I have, like, 2 books I want to read before that happens, but, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, we're going to do this shit.
I actually think, Bunny, you would really like K-Punk. You would really dig K-Punk.
Well, yeah,
A collection of
read
blog.
Capitalist Realism. It's 90 fucking pages. It's cool.
See, this is us
Yeah,
men. This is us men telling the one girl in Pinko Commie
Yeah.
to read.
No,
Also,
I
Bunny,
have
you
to
should read
full
Infinite
disclosure,
Jest.
No, but full disclosure, I have read full, long, tedious, heady shit just to get the joke of a
Okay,
meme.
seriously, CR is like
this
90
is
fucking
not-
pages. It's easy as fuck
Yeah,
to
so
read.
it's not. Yeah, it's kind of.
You should
it's
like
kind of
read it
silly
like
that I
3
haven't already read
times
it.
at least, but like also, yeah, just read it once. Like,
I used to call it the Communist Manifesto for the 21st century.
yeah, many people are saying that. Many people
Many
are saying that
people.
Amy Therese is a Mike Tracy alt, or Mike Tracy is an Amy Therese alt. Many people are saying this.
I've heard that. I've heard that.
I mean,
So
I
a
have
lot of
heard
people are
both
saying
their
this.
voices on a recording before and also met one of them. Yeah, no, many people are saying this.
I mean, I don't know. Just people are saying
So
it.
what was...
So-
Okay, this is actually an early 2000s quiz thing that leads into a Mike Tracy story. So do we remember, before there was G4 on digital cable, Al Gore started a digital cable channel? Does anyone else other than fucking me remember? Current. Thank you,
Current
Bunny.
TV, yes. Guess what? Before we get into it, I have received payment
That's
for
awesome.
work.
Current
from
TV
Current
was
TV.
basically Vice before there was Vice. It was basically Vice done by boomers.
But like,
It was like if Vice
Yeah,
just sucked a little bit more and was done by boomers instead of Gen Xers, you would have Current TV. But anyway, I do recall there was one time between the years 2008 and 2010, right after fucking Bird, that fucking former Klansman, Democrat dude died. Do we remember who that was?
oh yeah.
Right after
Yeah.
he died, this
Yes.
was like probably 2008, because I remember talking to fucking Mike Tracy about this shit. And him being like, oh, he was a Democratic legend, because Mike Tracy was a normie fucking Dem at the time. And I'm like, yeah, he's a fucking Klansman, dude. And he's like defending that, as Mike Tracy will. And I remember turning on current TV, and I literally saw, I forget what the fucking event was, but Mike Tracy was on my TV screen talking about how Robert Byrd could play a mean banjo, which offended me both as someone who doesn't like the Klan, doesn't like Mike Tracy, and also very much likes bluegrass as a genre. And I actually then did call Mike Tracy up, and I'm like, why are you on my TV? And he's like, oh, I was at this event in D.C., and these people interviewed me.
Robert Carlisle Byrd, born Cornelius Calvin Sale Jr.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Klansman, Democrat, stuck by Democrat.
In office, he was preceded by Strom Thurmond.
Yeah. Did Thurmond become senator? In like the 20-aughts, Mike Tracy was defending Robert Byrd's Klan membership because fuck Mike Tracy.
Yeah, we're at we're a little over an hour here. I think we hit all my we hit everything except discussing how we are Antifa
I'm actually communications director of the Outside Agitator division. I am trying to convince other people, parody, that I have gotten together with Al Qaeda to have a terrorism bro out.
I mean, the thing that Antifa, I say, Antifa is how we pronounce it in South Jersey. But yeah, no, the thing that Antifa and the left and Al-Qaeda all have in common, along with our Mark Fisher sub-series, is no girls allowed.
And then what that all has in common is that against my better judgment, I want to insert myself into those spaces.
One of us will be the Alfian character, the Alfian Jungian archetype whose hair will go up, and we will let you into the club, the He-Man club.
Well, and then I'll show you I'm worth it by punching something and spitting or something cool like that. That boys do.
I have not seen Little Rascals in a recent enough time to make these references.
Me either. I hope that's somewhat in the realm of
what a terrible fucking show. Leave It to Beaver is goddamn Casablanca next to Little Rascals. I'm going to go on record with that.
I'm pretty sure that every Antifa, Antifa, I have personally employed in our hierarchical structure of Antifa was one of those kids in middle school who was into Good Charlotte's Lifestyles of the Rich and took all of their political ideology from that music video.
Mm.
That's a good recruiting, trolling the people who thumbs up that video on YouTube. Go recruits.
Behind the bleachers to avoid square dancing classes in gym, and listen to Good Charlotte on a Walkman, and, dream about burning down the state. I don't know, watch Fight Club. Also take all your political aspirations from that movie, infuse it with Good Charlotte, put on, all black, but be very pastely white, get on phone calls with Kabul, and just learn how to suicide vest parody. BDS also. BDS also.
I know. I love talking to the guys who get their political aspirations from Fight Club. Because as much as they love that movie, they do not have a tight list of what buildings they would blow up.
The person who was coming up with that theory was
everybody good does.
Of the schizophrenic mind. But this leads into my general idea that the worst people, and I think they're dying out, but for a long time there was a crowd of people who, if they were to be interviewed by someone who asked them, what are your biggest comedy influences, they would unironically name the Three Stooges. Those people are terrible.
Yes.
Mel Gibson, I know from past interviews, was one of those people, and he hated Jews. So That's a like entertainers that like used to be a thing that I think is becoming less of a thing nowadays.
You know who also hated Jews?
Bobby Fischer.
That's true.
Nazis.
Also BDS.
Yeah, I guess.
Anyways, I'm communications director for Antifa. Please direct any questions, concerns, complaints that you want demolished my way, and I'll send those in the appropriate channel.
I just want to let anyone who's listening know, Steve is who sends roving bands of Antifa out sometimes to populate, you know,
we mostly
open mic
we
or
mostly
something like
employ Russians.
Yeah, and we wait for them to see someone innocently tell a joke of free speech, and then Antifa beats them up. So that is 100% a tracing that really happens all the time.
Molotov cocktails in cop cars, check. Mazel tov cocktails, getting back to the Jewish question. Oh, it's a Marxist reference.
Yeah, they're also called outside interloper cocktails.
George Soros' blood.
What would be in it?
The good stuff.
The good stuff. It's cool because
we'll just call that one the Bakunin.
Oh boy, guys! Did you also? You know, I'm going to end on this. Did you see that video of?
We haven't talked about Trump nearly enough.
Yeah, whatever. No, we're on the left. We love Trump. We're more angry at Democrats.
I want to end on suggesting everyone watch this video of Ivanka Trump. She is 100% a lizard person. If ever there were one, if ever there was a video where a bitch looked like she wanted to lick her own eyeball so bad.
The next lizard person holiday is September 30th. It's Rosh Hashanah.
No, I'm talking parasitic reptilians.
Anyway,
Donald Trump cleared out a bunch of protesters with tear gas to wave the Bible upside down.
No, a bunch of shit's been happening, and please continue to donate to things, and also put your fucking bodies on the line if you can. This is fucking important. This is not necessarily the revolution, but this is a revolution, and even if it fails, the failure of today's revolution is the success of tomorrow's.
All right, Lenin.
Actually, Luxembourg, thank you.
Luxembourg. 1905, baby.
Yeah.
Shout out to Matt Christman.
The fucking Easter Rising that led to the Anglo-Irish War of Independence. 1905 led to 1917. Yeah. You know, you fucking take the world as it is, not as you want it to be, and you do your fucking best.
That's right.
Good night.
Be brave about it, man.
Good night.
Yeah. See ya.
Good night, everybody. We did it.
Reform or Revolution by Rosa Luxemburg. At first view, the title of this work may be found surprising. Can the social democracy be against reforms? Can we contrapose the social revolution, the transformation of the existing order, our final goal, to social reforms? Certainly not. The daily struggle for reforms, for the amelioration of the condition of the workers within the framework of the existing social order, and for democratic institutions, offers to the social democracy indisputable time. The struggle for reforms is its means, the social revolution its aim. The state became capitalist, political entry aim. Capitalist development modifies essentially the nature of the state, widening its sphere of action, constantly imposing functions, especially those activities over time, making developments, specifically because, and in a measure that, these interests and social developments coincide in general fashion with the interests